It's my pleasure to present and announce a person that needs no announcement. You all know Heinz. He's the president of the Economiesuisse. Heinz was chairman of the management board of Ringier, Schweiz, then at the Swisscom Group and at Axpo Trading, so all the pearls in the Swiss economy. And he's now acting as the chairman of Economiesuisse, and he will talk to us about the Swiss success model, Quo Vadis. The floor is yours.
So good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for the kind invitation. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here among you, talking about Switzerland's factors of success, Quo Vadis. And in order to get to the bottom of the question, I would like to provide answers to 4 questions. The first question is, how is Switzerland positioned in a worldwide comparison? The second question is, what are the reasons for this positioning? The third question is, how has the general environment changed over the last years, or let's say last decades? And the fourth question, last but not least, is now, based on all that, what is our vision and what is our strategy? So that brings me to the first question, where is and how is Switzerland positioned in a worldwide comparison? From an economic performance, you know, we are a small country, 8 million inhabitants. We are on number 1994. As far as concerned the economic powers, or the GDP as a number, we are number 19 in the world. In a European comparison, we are number 6. To make a comparison with other countries, as far as concerned the GDP, we have more or less the same size of the GDP like Finland, Portugal, and Slovenia combined. In terms of GDP per capita, we have a larger GDP per capita than Portugal and Slovenia combined. We have had a quite interesting growth over the last 2 decades. So from 1992 to 2002, we had a yearly growth of 1.21%. From 2002 to 2012, 1.69%. 20 years ago, we had a very strong industry sector. Do you know the percentage of the GDP growth 20 years ago of our industry sector? It was around 20%. It was around, do you know the percentage today? It's interesting. It's still 20%. And do you remember the discussion about the likelihood of the deindustrialization in the 90s we had? Quite interesting. Why do we have this situation still today? Maybe many reasons. Do you know that we invest double of the average in Europe as far as concerns the research and development from the private sector, just from the private sector? You know, we are in the ranking in terms of innovative ability, in a worldwide ranking in the top. Let's have a look to the labor market. We have a more equally distributed income than, for instance, Germany and France. We have a very low unemployment rate. Oh, let's turn it around and say it positively. Almost everybody has a job in Switzerland. We have probably the most independent central bank or national bank in the world, and those that they didn't believe in that, I'm sure they are convinced since the 15th of January of this year. And as far as concerned the financial policy, we can say in an international comparison, we have quite a low indebtedness. What is the reason for that? Maybe because we have a debt brake introduced about 12 years ago. So all in all, we can say in international comparison, still in a good position. Coming to the second question, what are the reasons for this positioning? I'm sure there are a lot of reasons. First, maybe it's our understanding of a well-functioning market system, because we believe we get more innovations out of a well-functioning market system. It's the culture of free entrepreneurship in Switzerland. It's maybe the powerful infrastructure we had, a secure, efficient energy supply, the environment protection, at least in a worldwide comparison. And last but not least, I'm sure, the leading education system we have. And if we talk about the education system in Switzerland, we talk about the dual education system. You all know it. So the one way is the grammar school, the Matura, and then the university with basic research. So that's one direction, one way. And the other one is, I'm talking about 70% of the young people in Switzerland, that's the apprenticeship. Apprenticeship, and then a lot of optionalities. Optionalities with another apprenticeship, for instance, or the professional grammar school Berufsmatura, and afterwards the University of Applied Science, or apprenticeship and other high professional education. And the good thing is, and you can move from one way to the other. It's fantastic. Do you know how many other countries do have a similar, or this kind of a dual education system? There are not many. There are not many in the world. So for instance, Germany, Austria, the Netherlands, and probably Denmark. That's it. There is an interesting link between these countries. I'm sure you know the difference between correlation and causality. So for instance, in Germany, the birth rate is declining, as well as the population of the storages. So that's not causality. Of all the information I've had, that's correlation. So if you have a look at the countries with the dual education system, these are the countries with the lowest unemployment rate for young people. Do you know the percentage of the people that do Matura, gymnasium, grammar school in Switzerland? 20%. Thank you. 20%, around 20%. What about the other countries in Europe? Is there any other country with a percentage of 20%? Austria. Austria. The next one is Germany with around 45%. And then it goes up until to 92%. Why is that the case? Because all the others, they are more intelligent than Switzerland. Okay, forget it. No. However, it's quite interesting if you try to find out correlation or causalities. We also have a pretty different situation in Switzerland. We have one canton with a percentage of, let's say, around 13%. So average is 20, we have 13%. Which canton is it? No, St. Gallen. Is there anybody here from St. No, forget it. So then we have 3 countries with an average of about 30%. Geneva, Canton Basel-Stadt, Basel City, and the Ticino. Interesting. So we have quite a wide spread in terms of education concerning these 2 ways. Another interesting figure is, do you know how many apprenticeships we have in the companies on 100 employees? It's about 4-point-something apprenticeships. So a company with 100 people have 5 to 6 apprenticeships. Quite a wide spread in the cantons. We have one with about 9-point-something. 9-point-something. Which canton is it? It's Canton Appenzell-Innerrhoden. Then we have one with just 2 apprenticeships on 100 employees. Which canton is it? Geneva. So it's quite, I'm sure there are a lot of arguments. However, I think we have to be really careful as far as concerned the development of our leading education system. If you ask people, they come from abroad to Switzerland, what is the reason to come to Switzerland with your company? They say financial stability, political stability, legal stability. So in other words, there is a puzzle of reasons why we have this positioning in a worldwide comparison. Now, coming to the third question, how has the general environment changed over the last years and, let's say, decades? I would like to touch 4 aspects. The first aspect is the social perspective. How has the community changed? I would say the institutions like the army, like the church, like politics, also the business elite, they do not have the same, or let's say the other way around. I see a certain erosion in terms of trust towards this institution. Many reasons, maybe we come later onto that. Second aspect, the media. I do not know what you observe in terms of media development. The one reason is always about digitalization, but we have more and more a personalization. We have more and more a scandalization in the media environment. The third aspect, this is all about politics. We have more pressure from abroad. There's more a fight about which country has the best frames for businesses. Talking about tax dispute, I'm talking about banking secrecy and others, and it will go on. Internally, we can say our basis is, on the politics, is finding consensus. More and more we have a polarization, which not really helps in terms of our DNA to find consensus. We have negatively formulated a wave of initiatives coming. But let's say the other way around, the number of initiatives is increasing. And let's talk about the fourth aspect. It's about the economy or about the business. The business is more and more international. That means more and more people, responsible people for companies in Switzerland, have to invest the time in other markets, with other clients, with other partners. In other words, less time for Switzerland. We have more and more people based on this international development coming from abroad, being responsible for companies in Switzerland with no roots here, with probably a high interest in the politics, but they are afraid to talk about, because then they don't tell me what we have to do in Switzerland, etc., etc. So there are many developments to consider if we talk about the future. So coming to the fourth question, what is our vision and what is our strategy, taking into account all I've said about today's positioning, about the reasons for this positioning, and talking about the factors or the general environment. Vision. If you Google the word vision or the definition of the word vision, you will find a sentence in English. This is a vision is a dream with a deadline. I think a pretty interesting definition. So then let's first talk about the deadline. And I would say we set the deadline the year 2020. That's not too far away, but it's not tomorrow. Now, what is the objective for the year 2020. In an international comparison, let's assure today's positioning in terms of being competitive. We are, you know, in the yearly ranking still in the top. Being innovative, you know, in the yearly ranking we are still in the top. And thirdly, as far as concerned the unemployment rate, or let's say everybody has a job in Switzerland, even in the year 2020, full employment. So that's 2020. The good question is now, what do we have to do to turn the vision into reality? Or in other words, what is our strategy? We believe the strategy stands on 6 pillars. The first one, you remember the figures about the economic performance. We are number 19. I'm talking about the export. So foreign policy has a very, very important or a very, very big relevance. Foreign policy, first one. There we're facing 2 challenges. The one is all about our relation with the European Union. You know, after the vote, after the decision of our citizens, the 9th of February last year, we have an unsecure situation, we have an instable situation as far as concerned the relation between the European Union and Switzerland. And you know how important it is. I mean, 56% of the export goes to the European Union, 75% comes from the European Union. We have about almost 300,000 cross-border commuters. We have border crossings every day, more than 1 million. We are talking about the market of 500 million consumers. So this is extremely important to stabilize. So the question is, how can we make sure to respect the decision of the 51%, but majority, that's typical Swiss, 51% decision to turn the 120A Constitution article into law, respect the decision on one side, and on the other side, how can we convince our partner, the European Union, to keep the bilateral agreements, or what is the price? So that's the one challenge. The other one is, you know, actually the European Union and the US, or the United States of America and the European Union, they're talking about the TTIP, a free trade agreement, transatlantic trade and investment partnership agreement. Means all about the hindrances in trade and help investment in terms of from a legal perspective should be in that agreement. If next year we have such an agreement in place, the position in Switzerland is much more difficult for exports to the US. So one of the possibilities, the likelihood would be that companies with strong export, in particular to the US, would more invest maybe in another country in the European Union or somewhere else. That brings us into a certain trouble. So how can we make sure that we dock, for instance, to this free trade agreement? So I'm still talking about the first pillar, foreign policy. These are the 2 challenges for the coming, let's say, 1, 2, 3 years. The second one is, let's take the financial and tax policy. And I would like to point out 2 challenges. The one is the tax reform. You know, 5 tax systems in Switzerland on different levels they are not compliant with the international tax guidelines which were developed over the last years and months. So in other words, we have to replace this tax system. That's a challenge in our system we had in Switzerland. So it's just securing this situation. So it's not giving any gifts to companies, etc. So it's just how can we make sure that today's situation in terms of attractiveness of our fiscal position for businesses can be done. So it's replacing the systems. That means reducing the corporate tax, implementing concepts like the innovation box and others, and making counter-financing from the state level to the cantons. Very difficult, because in all cantons we have a totally different situation as far as concerned the business mix. Big challenge, and the biggest challenge is less in the parliament, much more in the population. So in other words, how can we convince the people that they really think that's the best what we can do, the best not just for the businesses, it's for Switzerland. And that's for sure a big challenge. The other one we are facing, that's the old age pension system. You all know the life expectations is increasing. The question is, how can we finance the great system, the pension system we have in Switzerland? And you know, we had 2 votes about it in the last years, and the outcome was not very positive. In other words, the next vote has to succeed, because it will be more and more difficult to introduce or to change or to adapt elements of our old age system. So the third pillar, that's all about our leading education system. So we really have to be careful as far as concerned the development of each of these ways, or not have in a way a sort of a migration of the one or two other ways, which is a little bit the situation. The fourth one, that's all about infrastructure, the powerful infrastructure. That's all about secure, competitive, sustainable energy supply. And that's all about environment protection. So how can we find the right balance to go this path, to go this way, but also taking into account how can we finance it? How can we do that? And the fifth pillar, that's all about regulation. And unfortunately, I do not have the time now, because I need another 2 hours to talk about all about the regulation. I mean, there is no doubt about we need regulations. There is no doubt about it. We also need further regulations. But the question is always, do we need this kind of regulation do we need this regulation in this kind, or is there any other possibilities? Can we replace the new regulation with others? Is there the need really given? Do we need a Swiss finish, or is it better to have a comparable guideline in terms of law in Switzerland with a global one? I mean, much more these kind of questions. The sixth pillar, the last one, has nothing to do with any dossiers, let's say it that way. It's much more about the general environment which has changed. I'm talking about the trust erosion, the trust between people, population, citizens, and institutions, and in particular with the business or the business elite, let's say it that way. Because I think we have a quite modern political system with our direct democracy. Because all these tensions we see in the community, we are not alone. I mean, we have everywhere the Stuttgart 21 and others, more and more. But we have the chance to vote about it. In other words, fantastic, to reduce these tensions. That's involving people, that's involving populations, that's involving citizens. So from that perspective, I think fantastic situation, in particular for Switzerland, also for Swiss businesses, in comparison to others. But, now it comes to but. How can we stop this erosion of trust? Or how can we renew the trust towards the people, population? I would like to mention three elements. The one is, until now, if you had a vote, it was more, let's say, in terms of communication, jumping from vote to vote, doing a campaign. We believe that's no longer sufficient. We think we need a constant dialogue. We need a constant dialogue about businesses, needs for businesses, about tensions in the community, about needs from a citizen perspective, a constant dialogue. The second one, I think we have to intensify the discussion about business, about needs for business, about products, about new services, about innovation, about jobs, about everything. In schools, everywhere. And the third element I would like to mention, maybe in the past it was possible that politicians, they say, so that's the topic we have, two possibilities, we want to go that way, or also business elite. I think this is gone. This is gone. And if it's not possible that just 1, 2, or let's say 10 people can take the lead in this kind of discussion, the answer is then we have to have, from the business perspective, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s of people within the business. They are prepared, willing, convinced to go into such a dialogue. If let's say 50,000 people would invest just 1 day out of 365 days in the year, more than today in a dialogue, would be fantastic. So coming to a conclusion, I think, yes, we can say we are still, in comparison to all other countries, in a pretty good situation. I see some challenges, risks for sure, also opportunities. And maybe you know the German cabaretist Karl Valentin. He said once, in the past, the future even looked better. So let's do everything together. Then in the year 2020, Karl Valentin is not right. Thank you very much for your attention. Pleasure to be here.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Oh, the first question. Over here, Norbert.
Yeah, dear Heinz, you proudly mentioned that Switzerland has still a proportion of about 20% contribution to value creation to the national product. Do you see any danger now, due to the currency situation, that there will be a de-industrialization? Are there any strategies to prevent this? Or will it be a destiny to come to a level like France, only 12%? I would prefer that we have a strong industry sector with research and development and creative jobs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thom, for this question. I do 100% agree as far as concerns your statement, the latest statement. I also want to have a very, very strong industry sector, and we all know how important for our country in terms of the mix also of jobs it is in terms of value creation. I do agree. It's a big challenge. It's a big, big, big challenge. I mean, you remember after the decision of the Swiss National Bank, of the central bank, everybody was talking about it. Everybody was talking about it. Today, well, every quarter, when we do new figures in the statistics, it's not so difficult for the moment. And that's a problem. Within the politics, I mean, nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about it. Coming to your question, what is the recipe? What can you do? I think overall, there are two dimensions. The one is, as far as concerned the central bank, keep it independent. Keep it independent. Forget all the ideas with the directorium from 3 to 5. I really don't see what it could help. All about the ideas with the funds, forget it. It won't help for different reasons, not at all. In other words, we have to go the other path. We have to go the other path, and the other path means two elements. The one is innovation, 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 and innovation again. We have to do everything which allows our companies to be innovative. I'm talking about education, etc., etc. So all about innovations. And secondly, we have to be careful with all the regulations coming, also taking into account that every new regulation would have an impact. I do not say there's no need for regulation, but once again, we really have to think about, is there really a need for a new regulation, in particular in the labor market, because this is one of the assets we have. And if you compare our situation with other countries, let's say like France or others, you really see how many advantages this kind of labor market, also as far as concerned the partnership with labor union, etc., has.
Let me ask a question about this reintroduction of trust. I like this. But we do everything to provide distrust systems at the moment. I give you a provocative example. The first one is new public management. The second one is SAP. So these are big regulation technologies. Even my university is run by SAP. So if I have to type in at the end of the year my AAA, which is annual academic achievements, then in my field, chemistry, editing a book is not even foreseen as a category because it's stupid to edit a book. Go to the lab and do something. If this is not distrust and regulation, I do not want one. So how do we challenge this question? If I ask the expert, of course experts know everything. That's another problem with introducing a permanent dialogue. If I ask the expert, they say this is needed for good management. We save money. We make it streamlined. We make it more efficient, and so on and so on and so on. But at the same time, it has these drawbacks. What would be your suggestions on it?
Yeah, I do agree. I can follow your observations, absolutely. I would say there are two, let's say, target groups, let's say it that way. The one is that's all of us. We want to have for everything an insurance, also in terms of law, regulation, for everything. So that's a trend. That's really a trend. For every problem, we want an immediate solution, and sometimes the solution is a bigger problem. So, but that's really a trend. The second one is the target group, let's say it, that way, the parliament. The pressure from the media on the politics is enormous. We have a problem here and there, do something. I mean, all the motions, initiatives you see, this is unbelievable, unbelievable. So that's trend and that's observation. What can we do? Once again, I think the dialogue, talking about it, not just doing when we have such a situation. So to sensibilize all the people that probably the initiative, which is original, absolutely understandable, is not the best way for solving this problem.
So you would agree, Academia Engelberg is a perfect exchange platform to
fantastic.
do something.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So
fantastic.
That's the message.
You should do it once a week.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. I talked to you about sponsoring.
Oh, oh, every second week.
You mentioned the old age pension system problem. One solution would be to activate groups like elderly people into the labor market, and women in particular. Which idea do you have as a president of the Economiesuisse to tackle this problem?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Osserloh. We have initiatives for both. What we always try to do something without regulation, without law. So first, as far as concerned the older people, there are so many companies in Switzerland. They have their own programs and programs for 50 plus. Most of them, they call it 50 plus. So what can we do to keep them as long as we can in the company? The one is everyone has to make sure that the education or the knowledge is up to date, and the company has to push them. So the better this situation is, the lower is the risk that somebody has to leave the company. So in other words, we have a lot of initiatives in the Swiss businesses, but we also have a lot of companies, they do nothing. So what we do now is talking about good examples. Talking about good examples that more and more companies, they do not just observe the situation, they have their own initiatives and feel them really responsible to address it. The same situation we have in, as far as concerned women. You know, I mean, the fact is that in an international comparison, a high participation of women, but most of them part-time. Most of them part-time. So how can we increase that to get also a payback in terms of education? We think there are a lot to do. The one is a regulation, a tax. So we have disincentives for a family that also the one or the other partner, so in this case, a woman would more participate. The other one, we do not have the system in terms of caring about children. So we have to find better solution for caring for the whole day of children. So that's all about regulation. We support this direction. We support this direction in the politics. Hopefully, we can increase this participation as well.
Bruno.
You rightly said that we are on the top in very many respects in Switzerland. You could have mentioned that we are the happiest people in the world, and that counts. It's not only the economy. My point, you rightly said that Swiss executives and other people have less and less time for Swiss issues. I think that's a very important point with which I agree. But what can we do? The answer is relatively simple. Involve foreigners. So we should give them voting rights according to the number of years they have lived in Switzerland. Secondly, give them the possibility to compete for political offices immediately. And thirdly, the young foreigners living in Switzerland should be forced to do military service or social service as we Swiss have to do it. How do you react to these proposals?
Thank you very much for your statement. I'm not a politician, so I can say it as a private person from that perspective. I do agree that we have an unbelievable challenge in terms of integration of people. I mean, all what's going on now, I mean, that's for sure not the end. That will go on. So, in other words, do we have a clue how it could look like in 10 years or in 15 years? And not just starting too late as far as concerned this kind of integration. So in other words, I do not say, yes, we have everything to do, but it's a challenge. We have to take into account the development of the situation. My point is much more, as far as concerned, your statement, you repeated, which I did 10 minutes or 20 minutes ago. I mean, the people in the business, they have to involve themselves. They have to. They have to. Otherwise, we would leave or we would quit the system, the successful system of today. More and more professional people feel responsible for the country. I mean, that's not the way in that I believe. That's not the DNA we have. So we have to do everything that people from the business have to involve in politics, to be sensibilized how important it is. I mean, you are a professor. I'm not sure how much in the universities we talk about the political responsibility of business people. I know you do it. I know. Much too less. This is so important. You don't have just a responsibility for a company. You are a company in a community. So you have to take responsibility also from this aspect. And that's a little bit my point.
Thank you for the speech. It was really interesting. You said something about more integration, or let's say keep this kind of culture in Switzerland, this economic culture, culture in general, to keep the economic advantages. My question would be, we realize actually that we have, I don't like this term globalization too much, but like some kind of a globalization, and especially the European level is really important for Swiss enterprises. And I would have the question, we see now actually that we have to keep this kind of, or you said, this kind of Swiss culture, but at the same time we have a lot of enterprises and companies who are as well dealing with problems in other countries. So how do you deal with this problem that we have kind of a Europeanization of the economic?
How much time do you have? No, it's a very, very good. I mean, I do not have that recipe, but I think your statement is absolutely right. I do agree. I mean, the key is that more people have to be aware that everything is local. I mean, it's not just the consumer that every business people is talking about. I mean, to be part of a community, that's as an understanding, is extremely important, irrespective if you have a company which is in all markets or just in Switzerland. All these companies have their understanding, everything is local. So we have to be part of this local community. And as far as concerns Switzerland, I guess that the big advantage is our federalism. So that we come from a down-to-top system, let's say it that way, that the communities, they are responsible for everything, for something not, so they have to delegate to the cantons. And the cantons are responsible, if not, they have to delegate. So totally the other way around from a lot of other countries. We have to keep the system of responsibility to the communities, to the population. This is a big advantage. The challenge is, for sure, how can we nevertheless speed up maybe in terms of such decisions. And the businesses, they play a very, very important role for that system, feeling and also behaving as a part of the community.
Thank you very much.